This movie is one outcome of several years of collaborative work between African indigenous communities in 7 countries and the UK-based Forest Peoples Project. We filmed this in Cameroon with Baka and Bigeli communities from 3 areas, spanning the entire breadth of the country in locations along the northwest edge of the Congo Basin, one of the most biodiverse areas of the world. For many generations, these Baka and Bigeli communities have existed by hunting and gathering across large areas of forest which have recently been turned into protected areas. The park boundaries cross their traditional territories, separating them from their ancestral lands. Ernest is a Baka from southeast Cameroon, between Lobeke and Bumba national parks.
Autant, quand nos parents vivaient là-bas, c'est-à-dire ils avaient tout, ils ne cherchaient rien. Même quelqu'un tombait gravement malade là-bas, on prend quelque chose là, on le soigne vite. Il reprend la santé. On ne cherchait rien. Et maintenant? Bon, maintenant, comme la loi a interdit, que nous ne partons plus chasser là-bas, c'est pourquoi nous partons ici jusqu'aux limites du parc national. Nous menons nos activités jusqu'aux limites du parc national. Bon, à part si nous avons besoin d'aller pêcher, faire la cueillette là-bas dans le parc national, bon, comme ça, nous demandons la permission.
Ga ojo ga me ga fe gbie ga lubo ma ga lundo wa lu ndo jobo ga jo ma be
bala
ejengi ba nojo ko se ba nojo ga mo pa me ga mo ya ese firi
Since 2001, FPP has been examining whether international conservation principles protecting indigenous and traditional peoples have been applied in Africa. Many of these principles are embodied in the African Charter on Human Rights and the Convention on Biological Diversity, which over 170 countries have now ratified. They were established in 1992 by the World Conservation Congress and are supported by WWF, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and the World Commission on Protected Areas. These widely agreed standards should now be enforced to protect the welfare of indigenous people who have lived for many generations on lands now taken over by parks. FPP has discovered that the widely agreed standards for working with indigenous peoples are not being applied in any of the cases we examined in Rwanda, Uganda, DRC, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and in Cameroon. There, the right of Bigeli and Baka to continue their way of life with their forest is under serious threat, as their forest rights are effectively confiscated by conservation authorities without their consent. These conservation authorities then apply new rules preventing them from using the forests upon which they have always relied. It is not surprising that many Baka and Bigeli now resent and fear conservationists. Northern-based donors and conservation organisations are directly implicated in the establishment and management of the Jaa Wildlife Reserve and Campomaan, Lobeke and Bumba National Parks, where this film was made. And they dominate conservation programmes in most of the other cases we have examined.
Ngezo zale ane ba tarban ba wi mama tete ka ba mone yo ba yene na Bon ya benga bela yon ze bena bo fega na ba wi na le benga kwa nende be mana kale bese.
Ai tabu male ko nai ma gwe so pa pa ka kai ai tabu male ko nai ma gwe so pa pa ka kai ai tabu be ai tabu male ko be o he ma gwe so pa pa ka kai ai tabu male ko.
In common with many other indigenous communities, Baka and Bageli face appalling poverty within their own society. They are arguably the poorest of the poor in Cameroon, with little or no access to education or health care. This has been well documented by the Forest Peoples Programme. Even so, Baka and Bageli communities do not understand why they were not consulted about the establishment of parks over their lands. They are particularly unhappy with new park rules that forbid them to hunt, gather or fish on their ancestral lands, even though Baka and Bageli rights to traditional sustainable use of their forests are protected by international treaty. Conservation organisations in many African countries continue to make little distinction between indigenous communities carrying out subsistence activities in the forest and outsiders who come in for commercial exploitation.
Bye.